What's up, boys and girls? Today I am joined by Ryan Hall. Ryan is my business partner at Poker Spirit. He is our head strategy coach and my dear friend. So Ryan, what would you tell the people about yourself?
What's going on, James? Thanks for having me. So let's see, I've been playing poker. I'm 33. I have been playing poker professionally for, I always say 12 to 13 years now in the chat. And then when I've actually thought back on it now, I'm like, holy crap, I've actually been playing for 15 years. So I dropped out of school, started playing poker professionally at 18. And yeah, here we are now. Playing what started at No Limit, did tournaments for a while, did cash, did heads up, now 5-card.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. I had the same realization. I mean, I learned how to play poker, I think my senior year of high school, which was, God, 2003, this is a long time, it's 20 years now. And I started playing professionally in 2008. That's, don't make me do math, that's 15 years, I guess. So yeah, it's been a while. Now you achieved some pretty high stakes in heads up no limit. You were playing up to 100, 200 at one point, is that right?
Yeah, played a little bit up to 100, 200, but mostly anywhere from like 510 to 2550, I would say was my average stakes.
I remember when we were working together, you sent me a hand that you had played against Daniel Negreanu when he was getting up ready for his challenge with Doug. And he was like sitting on the lobbies in one of the American sites, or you were sitting and he sat you. And I remember that being pretty cool. Just like for me as a mental game coach, like, oh, I'm coaching a guy who was just playing, Daniel Negreanu at 50, 100 or 100, 200 or whatever it was.
Yeah, so that was at the time that he was preparing for the match versus Doug. And I think I just had like a 10-20 game open or 25-50. And this guy sits down that I've never seen. And anytime you see like a screen name that you've never seen, it's like, whoa, what is this? Like, is this a rec? Is this a reg? Like you're trying to figure it out at first. And it actually didn't dawn on me until like an hour into playing him. We didn't play that long. We might've played like a couple hours, one table. And I was like, wait, Dean Eggs, like, is this actually, and I was like, oh, he's getting ready for the challenge. I guess that's him. But it was pretty cool to play him.
Yeah. I remember like the match wasn't super eventful, right? Like it ended around even-ish.
Yeah, I think it was up like half a buy-in maybe.
Cool. So like tell the people a little bit, like how did you come to work with Poker Spirit? Because you were a heads up NL player and now you're the head strategy coach for a PLO 5 stable. Like how does that happen?
Yeah, so what was this 2020, you and I started working together. I hired you as my mental coach, and a few months in, I was still specializing or like focusing my time on heads up no limit. And then we went on the retreat together. After that, you brought the idea to my attention, like, hey, would you potentially be interested in this new, like, I didn't even know about POKER at the time. You're like, would you, be potentially interested in coaching the team? And I think I was interested because like, I wanted to go back in a sense, like thinking about where No Limit was in 2008. And I was there, and I think I did well, but I didn't feel like I captured all the EV I could have, like the way that some guys did, so I think it was very appealing to me to try to get sort of first movers advantage in something else. And like 2017 to 2019, I started at 6 max, did Doug Polk's heads up course through Upswing. It was really mind-opening for me at that time. Like the content was so good. It was so new to me. It was so interesting. And like in that 3-year span, I specialized in heads up and I did pretty well. And like, I think at the time it was like, what is next? Like, it's like you're only getting action from 1 or 2 guys. And then if guys are willing to give you action at those stakes, you really have to question if you even have an edge. Like anytime someone's willing to sit you at 25-50, it's like, okay, what does he know that maybe I don't? So
Right.
it's like, what is the next thing for me? And I think also I was just a bit drained with it, like the thinking that came with it. So, during that 2-year span, there's probably about for a year, I battled this other regular heads up, and we played like 50,000 hands together. And for the first 10,000 hands, I think we broke even. And then I really went to the lab and worked on studying his game and ended up doing very well. And, there's a certain amount of, like, you could say, oh, like, was it ego battling? And to some extent, maybe it was, but it also, I think it validated myself, like, to me. Like, I knew, I believed at this point that I could compete at a very high level with somebody that I very much respected. And I still have, like, the utmost respect for this player to this day. Like, I kind of love this guy in a lot of ways, because I think he made me so much better at poker. And now at the same time, I was drained after all of it. Like, it was so rewarding because we did this match and I saw the monetary, there was a decent monetary gain, right? Like, I think I was up maybe 80K total at the end of all of it, which is, fine. But it drains me, so that's why, like, I was like, okay, I don't necessarily want to be battling these really, really smart guys throughout my 30s, so I really much was interested, I think, for that reason.
Right. Yeah, I remember we talked a lot about that match when we were working together. And I remember you kind of saying that you spent a lot of your time, playing this guy, sometimes late into the night, sometimes throughout the night, sometimes in the morning. Like, it wasn't exactly wake up, eat my breakfast, meditate, and get to the tables and see who sits. It was, battling this guy for 13 hours straight, unable to sleep because you're so, like, adrenaline pumped up and this kind of thing. And I remember we talked about, like, well, how sustainable is that? Like, how does that affect my relationship, like, with my wife? How is it going to be? And I think, like, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but I seem to remember when we were discussing that, kind of bringing up this idea, like, what's it going to be like if you have kids?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to be dad's up at 6 a.m. in the living room, like, just battling, and you know what I mean? And then feeling low the next day if their energy is drained and it didn't go well or whatever, like, how long can we do that for,
Yeah. There was a time where my wife went to bed, who was my fiance at the time. I was playing. She went to work the next day. I was playing the same match. She came home and I was still playing. And so I knew that, that wasn't going to be sustainable for the long term.
So transitioning a little bit, like, No Limit Hold'em was kind of drying up. It's been drying up for a while. You felt that, you were there when No Limit Hold'em was really kind of a great opportunity, greater than in 2017, not the same opportunity as 2008. And you saw a new game and thought, okay, I can be one of the ones to really maximize my opportunity. So, you got into the lab, started learning PLO5. What has been more challenging than expected?
As far as playing PLO5?
I guess both sides, like, in terms of all of it, playing, in terms of becoming a coach in a game you hadn't played before, in terms of, being a coach in a stable, it's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm someone who, I hold myself to a high standard. So there's inherently a lot of pressure that I put on myself. I'm like, I want to be, my mindset has kind of shifted now where I'm super competitive. And, for a long time it was, okay, I want to be the best player that I'm capable of being. And now it's like, well, I want to be the best coach that I can be. And with that, there is a little bit of pressure, like for making videos or, just like how I disseminate the information, because there's so much talk on strategy. There's not as much talk on how to be a good coach, and it really is, I think, a different skill, trying to think of the best way to, give people this information, trying to understand what they might not understand. You know what I mean? It's like trying to figure it out is tough, and it's a different skill. So that's been challenging. As far as like understanding the game conceptually myself, it's, the person who first coached me told me that it was a very easy game. And I think I understand what he meant by that. I think he meant that it was easy in the sense that nobody is very good right now. But I think it's much more complex than No Limit. I mean, you take away like the bet sizing things, the fact that you can't do over betting and that kind of thing, but just thinking about, how many combinations there are, things being so fluid, having to bet fold strong value hands, it's really, really complicated, but it's also very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I switched from No Limit to PLO at one point in my career. Just the sheer number of different combinations of hands, you're kind of really forced to bucket and start thinking of your terms and your hands in terms of like the sort of same potential that they have, rather than in No Limit, it's very much the specifics. It's like, well, okay, how many big blinds does he have? Are we shoving queen 3 suited here, queen 2 suited? It's like, it's exact science, PLO is more, I mean, it's interesting because it is a little bit more feel at first, but then when you get into the weeds, you can start to get pretty specific about those things as well when you get really good at bucketing hands. And I think that's why it's kind of easy to, I shouldn't say easy, but it's sort of intuitive to get to a moderate level at PLO. You can kind of be a field player and sort of just get it. And for a lot of people, that can be enough to get to a certain level. But if you want to be elite, if you want to get to a really high level, I think for a lot of people, it can be more difficult. I do remember at least one exception. There was a guy, Kumikun. I don't know if you know this guy.
What was his name?
I think it was a Kumikun, like Cumicon.
Okay.
He used to play heads up PLO. I remember I'd go on a site and he was sitting every stake from like 2.4 to 25.50. And he played on many sites. I think he was a Canadian guy, but at the end of his career, he retired, posted his graph up and to the right, several $1 million, and just said, I never studied. And I think it's a good, I don't know, testament that some people are differently abled. He probably was just very intuitive, and there are people who kind of pick up on these ideas, these heuristics that we get from like a solver, and they sort of just get them from playing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I remember when I worked with Jungle Man, I talked with him and I asked him, I said, like, why are you so good? One of the things he said to me was just, well, I have a really easy time recalling information. So almost anything that I've looked at, I can just remember it. And I sort of thought of like the guy in Suits, the genius young lawyer. But it was very honest, he's saying like, I'm very good at this skill that, if you think about it, being able to remember every spot you ever looked up. I'm not sure it's quite that level, but that's a pretty big advantage versus like having to figure out how am I going to commit this to my memory,
Yeah, almost like he might have a photographic memory or something.
Yeah, something like that, what do you like? I don't answer for you, but what, like, do you think you have an inbound trait that's helped you to be successful as poker?
I do. I think my mind is good at identifying patterns. So I don't think that the best poker players are always necessarily the smartest people. I've known people who I thought were clearly a lot smarter than me, but not the greatest poker players. But for some reason, I think my mind is pretty quick at identifying patterns. And I think that's particularly why I resonate with heads up, because I think I'm able to quickly identify like patterns, and because like everyone has little patterns. It could even be something like bet sizings, right? Like maybe they hit 3/4 pot and then add a couple extra clicks with a value hand or something like that. And like I'll notice something like this. But it is interesting when you talked about like these guys like Jungle Man or this guy Kumakan that just crush, and maybe they don't study. I do think it's important to like differentiate these wizards, because we can't all be like that. For the rest of us common men, like we just have to do it. We got to do the work. We have to put in the time, and it's not going to come as like, I guess what I'm trying to get at is we can't like always compare ourselves to them and just like expect that it's going to be like, we just have to show up, it's just not fair to like want to have those standards, and because we romanticize them, like I think in a way we secretly root for these guys that just show up and they're freaking excuse me, they're wizards, because we all like want to be. I think maybe it's I don't know, maybe there's some ego, but like I don't know about we all, but perhaps everyone would just like to be this smart or have this photographic memory. Does that make sense?
I think so. Like if I put it in the context of sports, right? You think of like MMA. There's two types of people. Like there's people who just want to see a guy like John Jones or Anderson Silva completely annihilate everyone and never be touched, like GSP, these guys who are just phenomenal to watch. And then there's people out there who will just can't wait for them to fall,
Right.
And I think it's similar in poker. There's guys who are very gifted, and then there'll be people who are a big fan of that and like really resonate with that and just like to watch that and aspire to that. And then there's people who will want to, take those people down or see them lose, and I think it's sort of a human nature thing,
Yeah. Maybe it's like whatever person you identify with the most, like whatever person you see yourself in, that's the one you root for. Like John Jones, correct me if I'm wrong, he's known to be just like uber talented, but not necessarily have to put in the work. Whereas GSP was like the guy who put in all the work, right? Like GSP, I think he talks openly about how he was bullied growing up. I don't imagine that would be the case for John Jones. I mean, he's a freaking physical specimen.
Well,
But
actually,
maybe like the people who want to be just like this super talented guy root for John Jones, and the guys who it's never come as easy for them would root for GSP.
I mean, fun fact, actually, John Jones was on my high school wrestling team. Like, I was a New York wrestler. We went to the nationals. So for the summer, he was on my like freestyle wrestling team. And at that point, this was like 2001, he was like 103 pounds and he was like 13. So he wasn't always a physical specimen, he was a skinny kid. But
so you met him?
Yeah. He used to throw water bottles on the bus on the way to the matches.
What?
Yeah, he was actually a sponge. He was a really interesting guy. Like he would kind of come up to everybody and try to pick their brain, So I'm not surprised he got far in life, because he really, despite the reputation he may have now, like he had a very studious mindset, and at least at that time was quite humble and like wanted to learn from other people. I do think a criticism of him has been in his career that there were times where maybe when he didn't feel challenged, the success got to his head, and he had close fights where he said, yeah, I didn't really train for this fight. And then in rematch with Alexander Gustafsson, he crushed. So you kind of tend to believe maybe that was true. Whereas, GSP's story is a little bit different. He was bullied a lot growing up, worked super hard. I met him as well, and I don't really know him very well. I just got a picture with him, but he.
Cool. No wonder you're such a big MMA fan.
Yeah.
Guys.
Yeah. He is known for his work ethic, and I don't know. I look at them differently, but I'm sure John Jones has worked really friggin' hard throughout his career at many times. There's just been some times he might have coasted. That's the narrative. But yeah. I get what but it's kind of funny because, well, I would root for someone like Jungle Man. I mean, maybe it's because I like him, personally, but I don't think that I'm like Jungle Man. You know, I don't see myself in him. Maybe a little. Maybe that's not true. Maybe a little bit. But I don't think I'm gifted on that level at all. But yeah, you know, like I think we root for the people that we like. You know, we root for the people that we and maybe for some people it triggers something in them to see somebody who has talents they don't have, you know?
Yeah.
Like some of us look at someone and we feel like that's cool and I want to aspire to be more like that person to the extent that I can be. And someone else looks at someone who's succeeding and it just like bothers them, you know?
Yeah. I could see that.
Big difference.
Yeah.
What I would have said if someone had asked me, like, you know, what do you think helps make Ryan successful? I would have said your work ethic, to be honest. I mean, I don't know about the pattern recognition that goes on behind the doors of your mind, but it's one of the things that always impressed me. You know, you just have this way of embracing the grind. You know, you're a fan of David Goggins, you know, like, as you said, very competitive. And I just kind of knew that even though when we started this project, I knew that you weren't like a student of PLO at that time. And, you know, there's other people I knew in the poker world who were already playing PLO or already playing PLO 5. I kind of asked myself, like, who's going to embrace this and get really far? And I didn't really feel like it mattered where you're starting with. I think it matters like the character and the approach and the intention that you bring to the project. And I just felt like, you know, Ryan's a crusher, so he'll crush this too. You know?
Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, I think probably I think I got like drive and work ethic from feeling like I underachieved in other things in life. So I felt like I had some talents at some other things, and like, well, like I guess in sports growing up, I thought I had some talent there and felt like I underachieved. Ended up not being satisfied with the way I left it. And then going back to what the, you know, like 2008 and poker, looking back, I think I felt like I underachieved and left, I mean, money on the table. And so I think with that, like I kind of, I don't know, I didn't want to underachieve anymore. I didn't want to like think of myself as a quitter or anything like that. So I think, yeah, like well, I also have like, I say this so many times, and I always say this to the guys that I mentor now, because I think this is so important. Like the people you surround yourself with, especially the older people in your life, man, like it's so important. You know, like I'm really grateful for the older people in my life. Starts with my brother, and then like one of my best friends, Keith, Mike Albini, shout out to Mike, guys. But I have like really positive people, older people. Like these guys are all, I mean, my brother 5 years older, but the other guys are like 10, 12 years older. And yeah, like, you know, I learn from them. And I think it's like, it's a cool process to then try to pass it down to the next younger people, you know? So that's going back to like what interested me about this. I think that's another thing.
Yeah, I mean, for those guys who don't know, listening to the podcast, your brother, actually a very successful poker player and sports bettor in his own right. Actually, I worked with him, and then he sort of recommended, oh, you should work with my brother Ryan. Great guy, really like him as well. And yeah, I mean, I think it's something that I honestly did very wrong in my poker career, but also right at times. What I mean by that is when I was living in New York in like 2008, I knew I was kind of the best poker player I knew, which was a big problem. So I moved to Vegas and I was like, I'm going to completely change my life to have people smarter than me be around me. And this worked to an extent. Like I got engrossed in the poker world, but at the time, because I was playing sit and goes, you know, nobody played sit and goes, right? Everyone played cash, they played PLO, they play, you know, exciting things. I'm sitting there playing, you know, sit and goes. It's kind of, I don't know. It's just different. So then when people reached out to me online, you know, I used to battle against like Stevie 444, Ben CB, all these guys. You know, there were people writing to me and wanting to study together. When I was doing really well, I kind of didn't want to share any information. I didn't want to study with the other guys in my games because like I look at Shark Scope and I'm number 1 or number 2 and they're number 4 or number 5. So I'm like, why I want to talk to this guy?
Yeah.
My mind is wrong. And, you know, while I did very well, there was definitely a time, unfortunately, where I got a little bit left behind. You know, I didn't go on to the success that Ben CB and Stevie 444 and these kind of guys achieved, and even Bryn Kenny, like all these guys used to play Sit and Goes back in the day. And
so you felt like you were better than them at the time that maybe they reached out, or like
those weren't the specific people that reached out, but just other people who were in the mix, you know. And it was a very competitive mix, but at the time I was probably just running pretty well. And, you know, I was good at the ICM portion of the game, but I wasn't as good at some of the, honestly, the post-flop part of the game, right? Like I learned how to play with the ICM calculator, and back in the day, that was enough, you know? But when people started working with PIO and started, you know, really understanding, you know, which ranges hit flops better and like, you know, which textures favor certain ranges and what sizings to use and stuff, I didn't have a study group that was like as passionate about that as they were about ICM. And for that reason, like, I started to fall behind because I was basically still a field player at that portion of the game. And it takes a while because of variance to realize you've fallen behind.
Right.
And because I didn't want to give a little bit up of what I knew and maybe share from my strengths, because I was kind of protective of the information, I had this sort of shortage mentality about being good at poker. I didn't get the benefit of other people's perspective in my chosen game type. And I fell pretty far behind. And that actually led me to eventually choose to switch to PLO because I had a lot of friends who played PLO. I'd always had poker friends, but I'd always played a different game. So I got the benefit of understanding a career as a poker player. And maybe that's how I ended as a mental game coach. Like I understood the dynamics of being a poker player, but I never really had that close-knit group of people to talk strategy, to talk specific reads on specific villains and specific strategies. That was always missing for me. And I think that's something I realized probably around like 28. So, you know, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years in my poker career. Like, oh, wow, that'd be really important to have. It was actually for me, like when I worked at a stable, I worked with Patrick Leonard at BitBee, and I saw that they had that. And I was like, wow, like I should have that, you know?
Yeah, this one's can be a little tricky though, right? Because I know what you mean by like you want to protect the information, or you're like I did a lot of that too. What do you think about this? Like maybe you just have to be careful who you share it with, or like understand like the value that can be like mutual value, you know? Like you don't necessarily just want to share information with someone who's going to be a competitor if they're not going to reciprocate, right? Or if they have nothing to add of value. Because there is like you do have to like protect your own interest to some extent, especially when it's people in the same player pools.
Yes, I think there can be a benefit sometimes though to studying with other people, even if they're not quite at your level. Obviously, like you would like to have training partners who are above your level, who you learn from. It's nice to have people below your level because teaching is like part of mastery, and then having people on your level because sort of steel sharpens steel. And I think that's sort of the same in poker and in sports. What I recognize is that even if I had kind of studied with some of the people who I might have been ahead of at the time, they were reaching out to other people. They were sort of networking. They were understanding new tool came out and what this person was doing. They sort of knew the space where I was just in my lane. I was just waking up, grinding Supernova Elite, breaking every day to eat sushi for lunch and coming back and grinding some more, you know? I woke up, I meditated, listen to audiobook, you know, play, eat, play, sleep. And that was my grind. And I didn't talk to people, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah, that makes sense. I think maybe it's like you can tell if someone is really serious and they're going to take their game to the next level, right? So the way you're describing some of these guys now, like they're reaching out to other people, they're networking, they're figuring out certain tools that maybe you weren't familiar with at the time. And yeah, that definitely makes more sense.
what I never was capable of recognizing at that time is that someone I was perhaps temporarily better than was probably going to become better than me and probably be someone I could actually learn from.
Right.
And I think that's very unique because I think my ego wouldn't allow me to feel that way. But for example, think about in our stable, we have Ito, right? And he's a guy who came in who we all kind of agree has a brilliant theoretical mind. And even when he's playing lower stakes, like his friend who brought him into the team is saying, I'm pretty sure he's going to be teaching me in 6 months' time. And like this kind of a perspective was really lacking, like to see that somebody else is really hungry, they're going to do whatever it takes to be successful. And even if I'd be like helping them more than it's helping me right now, they'd be a person I'd benefit to have in my circle and they're going to catch up quickly. That kind of thinking was lost on me at the time when I was 25, 26, you know?
Yeah. I was the same at that age. It's more black and white. It's just like, I'm here, this person's here. You don't think as much that, okay, this person's going to put in the work. I think you probably get better at like recognizing these types of things as you get older. You know, like if someone has like, they understand certain concepts that other people can't, you know, and then you can kind of see like the upsides, like, okay, give this guy a few months, let him work pretty hard. And, you know, he could definitely be up there.
It's also just a bit moving away from that transactional mindset. Like everything I do needs to be more plus EV for me than the other party. Because like, you know, it's an eye for an eye, the whole world goes blind, right? Like what kind of a life is it if the only reason someone is in a relationship with me is because they think it's good for them, but they're wrong because it's actually better for me. You know, if every relationship you come in trying to get more than you give, it's sort of the opposite to what you learn in really any kind of abundant minded industry, right? Like you want to give more than you expect to receive. You want to, like, you go into relationships like with a partner to not to be loved, but to love, you know, to give value, because giving value is like, it feels good, you know, it feels good to help other people. And that's a big shift. You know, I watched people learn it. You know, I watched in the first stable I was working with, you know, the guys come in, I just want to make money. Let's crush, let's make a lot of money. And then, you know, a couple of years down the track, it was quite clear that there was something more important to the guys than the money. You know, seeing the impact they had on other people's careers, seeing the difference they made in other people's lives. And that's something that, you know, now backing a bunch of players is like, you know, it's great to be able to feel like you've changed somebody's life. You've helped somebody have a better quality of life. So it's kind of clear that some sort of a change would need to happen. I mean, what do you think the ideal way to network and relate to people as a poker player is, Ryan?
You know, I think firstly, it's like, I don't want to put like shame or anything like that behind being transactional. I think it's very natural for poker players to be like, you know, think about what we're doing all day. We're kind of training our mind to be like very risk to reward transactional. And it's not easy to separate yourself from that. You know, I've told like some friends sometimes I get so analytical minded that I feel like I'm the only guy who'd be playing, you know, buy-ins for $5,000-$10,000. And yet I go into the CVS and I have to think for 10 minutes about whether I should do the 2-for-1 laundry detergent to save like $3 or something like that, you know. But it's like, it's just kind of, you have to like mindfully be able to turn that off, or else it'll just kind of creep in everywhere. And this idea of being transactional, it's like, I never even thought about this until probably right before working with you. Actually, I hired a relationship coach, and he was the one that brought like this idea to my mind. And I was like, oh, maybe I do like kind of take that with me a little bit. And but dude, like I was what, like 29 or 30 at that, yeah, something like that, before I even thought of this concept, you know. So it was like years and years and years of this risk to reward, you know, always thinking about you know, poker like that, and then taking that into like my life. So I think it's just something that you have to be mindful of it. And yeah, it's like anything else, you know, it's just like, it doesn't happen overnight.
Right. Yeah, I think I was very guilty of that too. To like 28, 29 years old, I started to realize that seeing people as like means to an end and seeing everything as like needs to be a positive ROI for me kind of leaves you in a bit of a lonely place, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
It takes out the magic of like personal relationships.
yeah.
It's like what, like I can't, you can't have like an organic relationship then. Like I can't just talk and exchange. Like another thing that I used to like, if I had really busy days, especially, or if I like trying to, play poker, I'm already up in my head. Like I'm going to the grocery store, I'm already up in my head, analytical, thinking about the next line, thinking about like, oh, this is what I'm going to do today in my session. And small things like um, saying hello to someone in the elevator and saying, oh, how's the weather? Oh, it's good. Yeah, we're going to get some sunshine today. I used to kind of dismiss those conversations, think like, what's the point? And now, um, actually, I can't take credit for this. I think it was my brother that really made me think about this. It's like the point isn't to say, hey, how's the weather? The point is to exchange energy with someone. And if you can do that in a positive way, like with a smile, like you can actually walk away from that conversation and feel pretty good about it. Like it'll brighten your spirits. But I used to think about it the opposite way. I'd be like, oh, I gotta do this. You know what I mean? And now I'm like, oh, like, yeah, wow. Like that was like, man, I don't know. You could just be like, you're talking to someone about their dog, you know? And it's like, wow, that was a really positive exchange. Like I can feel that I've like risen my energy from that.
Yeah.
Um, I appreciate that more now.
When I was grinding Supernova Elite, I remember that I was living in Vancouver at the time. I didn't have much of a life, and I would go to the coffee shop. I could make coffee at home, but there was something about like walking to the coffee shop and just maybe the barista was cute or whatever, but just having a smile from a person, like saying hello, like they kind of started to recognize me because I'd go to the same one every day, like twice a day or whatever. Um, Same thing, like yeah, I went to the same sushi restaurant every day for lunch. Probably I like sushi and I'm lucky I didn't get mercury poisoning, but it's like I like that they knew me. I like that they recognized me. Like when I left, I kind of felt like I have a life, which wasn't really that true at the time. I can remember when I would actually go out, not that I went out very often. I was like in the shower, like ready to go out to like, potentially in a social situation, maybe talk to some girls. And I'm like thinking about what hands I'm going to raise in the small blind, and like what I'm going to do versus a small 3-bet when I'm like 16 big blinds deep. Like I'm thinking about stuff that just does not prepare you to interact with, other 25-year-olds. You know what I mean? Like I found it very difficult to separate, to turn my mind off when you're playing poker that many hours a day, to kind of be a normal person.
Yeah.
You got to figure it out, because if you don't, you might get your goals and realize they don't make you happy. And that's actually the place I ended up that took me into my mindset work, was kind of like, okay, I'm successful at poker, I'm making 20K a month or whatever, why I'm not happy.
Yeah.
That was for me the thing that turned my journey on.
Yeah. I think it can be very isolating. Some of the times that I had the most success in poker were also some of my darkest times. And I think it's because it's, you know, very analytical, very much in your head, and the isolation. For me, it was even, and maybe other poker players resonate with this, it was the schedule difference. Like I used to play till 2, 3 in the morning. My schedule in my 20s was sleep from 4 a.m. to 12.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also something about waking up and it's already the middle of the day and everyone else is already, I just felt different.
Yeah.
It's like there's no sense of belonging or community. And like, yeah, I mean, I would just be in my head about talking to somebody, like go to the bar, trying to talk to a cute girl. There's one situation that I distinctly remember. There's just like this girl was kind of, as I've gotten older, I realized that like, kind of got some of the nonverbal cues. And I just remember thinking like, I can't go tour. What the hell am I going to say? It's just, so it can be very, yeah, isolating.
Yeah. I mean, do you think it'll change for younger people? Like if they hear conversations like this one enough, if they work with mindset coaches younger, if they, work with relationship coaches or dating coaches younger, or whatever it takes, do you think people will start to shift from, no life grind mode in 20s to like, okay, valuing relationships more in 30s? Like, do you think they'll start to do that shift earlier, or do you think it's just part of growing up?
I don't know. See, because I don't know if I would change anything for myself, because I look back now and it was just part of the process for me.
Yeah.
It's for most people, I don't know. I have different perspectives than maybe some. Like I think to some extent you have to get borderline obsessive with your craft if you want to be really good. So I think it kind of depends, like what I think you want to know what you're going for. Are you content with, like, how much money do you want to make?
Yeah.
Do you want to be, because if you want to be the very best, I believe if you're not the jungle mans of the world, photographic memory or what have you, you're going to have to do more than everyone else, and there's going to be sacrifices. So yeah, I don't think for me, I don't think I would change that much.
It's interesting, like this concept of balance versus obsession. When I look at my own life, when I got into poker, I became obsessed because I became convinced that if I go into this path, I'll have financial freedom. I'll make all my goals. So I just became obsessed with poker, and it worked. Later in life, when I was crushing in poker and I wasn't super happy with other areas of my life, I became obsessed with that. Started traveling, going to events, reading books, like, getting coaching, getting therapy, whatever, and I became really knowledgeable about that to the point that I became a coach for other people.
Yeah.
So I think it's normal. Like, even if we go back to John Jones, right? Like, he became obsessed, then he was a crusher, then he kind of started enjoying his life more, didn't take it so seriously, almost lost, became obsessed again, started crushing again. But how do we kind of stop to need, or is it just a natural part of life that, like, something happens in our life and that causes us to be obsessed? I mean, people get obsessed sometimes too late. Like, they start to have a relationship problem and now they try to fix it, but it's too late because the problem started too long ago. Like, is it just a normal part of life that we wait for things to happen to then kick us into gear? Or can we kind of sit down and plan what gear we ought to be in?
For me, I believe in seasons. So we were talking, before this call, and like right after I went through that grueling heads up match, it was 2019. I had a family issue come up. My godfather, who was like a second father to me, got sick, and I went down 2 hours away to Delaware, basically moved in with him for a month to take care of him in like his last month. And after that, I got heavily into meditation. And that's around the time that I hired you as my mental coach. And so this led me to my winter season. And there was a lot of reflection. Like I told you when we were working together, I was like, yeah, woke up today and rode my bike to the coffee shop and went there for 3 hours, journaled, thought about my life, and then came home and meditated for another hour. I think I needed that for preparation for what's now summer for me, which is wake up every single day and there's a lot of things to do. There's work to be done. And yeah, this works for me. I don't know what works for everyone, but like, I think now, like, there's times where, like, this meditation, I think it really helps me. It helps me deal with, even though like I don't meditate the way I was at that time, like it's not an hour a day anymore. I try to get my 10 minutes in. Every now and then I'll do my 1 hour meditation, but I've still taken it with me, and I think it prepared me for just like a larger workload and stress. And so I crave my winter again. There's many days where I do it. I'm just like, man, I just want to go to the coffee shop. But I take comfort knowing that I'll be there again. This isn't forever. But this, like, I believe very much in momentum. And so I'm going to get as good as I can right now and strike while the iron's hot, because I don't want to look back 5 years from now and be like, oh shit, I should have done more. I had it. I had the opportunity. I could have done it and I didn't. I'm aware now of what the opportunity is. And yeah, like I want to look back and be like, okay, I did what I could, and then I'll rest.
Yeah, I think that's very wise. One thing that I kind of came to learn about the seasons of my life is I'm a naturally curious person. I take interest in a lot of things. And I used to kind of think I needed to be doing everything I'm interested in all the time. And starting to understand, yeah, there's a season where maybe you're working really hard in poker. There's another time where maybe you're, really kind of digging into your inner stuff, your psychology. Maybe there's another time when you're, taking it easy, spending a bit of time more with family. Just like giving myself the peace to say, okay, this is the time for this. It's not the time for that. And that's okay. Because I think a lot of people, they're always beating themselves up about the thing that they're not doing. And it takes away being present for the thing that they are doing.
Right.
And it's just a bit inefficient, and that's a mindset shift that I came to eventually. Now, I would say meditation helps with that as well, because you start to hear that voice in your head, and you start to recognize like, oh, I'm sort of saying this to myself while I'm doing this. And that's not really in alignment. I'm not really on my team here. I'm sort of criticizing myself. So if I already think the action I've chosen is good, that's, why I chose it. Why am I, heckling myself while I'm doing it? And we start to kind of shift and remind ourselves instead, like, hey, we chose this time for this and we did it for a reason. And that changes everything. Like being on your own team instead of like your biggest opponent is, at least for me, it was a profound shift.
Yeah. I mean, how's that quote go? It's like, you do everything, but you're a master of none. You know what I'm talking about? It's like, God, it's such a well-known quote. I can't believe I'm forgetting it. But something like someone who does everything is a master of nothing, essentially.
I get
and
it.
That always kind of hit home for me. I was just like, I saw this, I started doing jujitsu around the same time that I was battling that guy heads up. And I was going like 3 times a week. And I was actually getting to the point where I was starting to see progress. Like I hired a one-on-one coach. This coach was really good. Like he was taking videos of our sessions. And I was like, man, like I could really like get good at this. And then I went through that heads up match, and I showed up like one day to class, and I was like on 5 hours sleep. I had been playing poker all week, and I just went in and just constantly got my ass kicked. And I was like, ah, shit. And it's not that, I think that getting your ass kicked is actually quite good, like it's good for your ego. It's humbling. So it wasn't that like turned me off why I stopped going. It was, I realized that other guys were mastering at it, and they were going 4 or 5 times a week. And I guess I had like a serious conversation with myself. It's like, all right now it's poker and I can't do both, at least for the standards I had for myself, like being competitive. I wasn't going to go there 1 time a week and just get my ass kicked and feel like I was not progressing. And I still want to go back to this someday because I think it's a really cool thing, but I'm going to go back. I'm 33 now. I'll probably go back with like I'm 38 or 40 when I know that I can dedicate the time to it to actually like see progress,
Yeah, I had similar realization with CrossFit. I mean, I did jiu-jitsu as well, but with CrossFit, I remember I was getting into it. It's just so exhausting. And I was like, it was still when I was grinding a lot. And I was like, I'm not a professional athlete. Like a lot of these people in my gym, it's like that was their main thing. Maybe they had a
Yeah.
9 to 5, some job or whatever, but their main thing that like got them up in the morning that they loved about their life was like being a CrossFitter. And I'm
Right.
like, oh, I'm a poker player. It's very different, you know. This is just like the thing I do for my fitness to be better as a poker player, really. So I couldn't keep trying to keep up with these other people when that was their main thing, because it was never going to be my main thing.
Yep.
And kind of talking about motivation and like, getting to a point with things where you like are forced to take action, and then kind of getting more perspective through experience. One thing that I have definitely learned, and I try to help implement for our players, is just being able to matter of factly sit down and be like, okay, what are my big rocks? Like, what's priority number one, and what is the thing that I'm really trying to accomplish? And then what can support that? And like you talked about, having time, you look forward to your winter. I mean, I like to, go on retreats, do kind of like my spiritual life, right? I plan that stuff, like some months away, like maybe this part of the year I'm going to travel a bit with, with my partner, and I'm going to spend some time like in reflection. And this part of the year I'm gearing up for, big events, and I'm going to be very focused and on it. And similar, like in high school sports, you have like the preseason, the season, the postseason, and the off season, right? Once you've been through some seasons, once you've been doing the same thing for a number of years, you sort of start to get good at planning your professional life, planning your adult life. I'm taking a vacation with my partner this time of the year. I'm really gearing up for this project at this time of the year. And organization, I think, is a huge thing that leads to quality of life improvements. Not just like, yeah, you'll do better in your career if you're organized, for sure, but like you'll also be happier. You get all the things that you want to do easier. And then,
I think organization is really key, because otherwise you just kind of wake up and it's like the rat race. I think I actually got this concept from you, like differentiating between what is it, urgent and important, like deep work. And I also got from you the what app I absolutely love? I don't know if you still use this. The Todoist app? I've been using that app. That's like, I'm off and on with apps. I feel like a lot of people are, I download an app, use it for maybe a month, and then boom, done. I've been using that app for about 3 years now. And it's, it probably drives my wife nuts, because like that app is my life. But for someone who I would say that I was terribly unorganized earlier in life, that app load has like gotten me much better, because I look like, one of the things I try to do is, if I don't organize this app, I wake up and there's 12 to 15 things on my list, but I try to like make it so that there's only 5. So I try to do 5 things per day. And then it also helps me like never forget things. So it could be something as simple as, okay, I don't have the energy right now to respond to something, but I know I won't forget it because I'm going to write it down in my app and revisit it later. So yeah, I think it's really important, the organization, not just for being like an efficient worker, but also for your own sanity.
Yeah, it's very true. I'm not still using Todoist, but I am still making lists. I use an app called Craft. It's craft.do. It's kind of like Evernote, but it's a document. You can make documents for anything, right? And I make lists for myself, for actually kind of funny, that the blocks of my life, like the seasons of my life.
Okay.
So I was going to go on vacation in March, right? So I had a big list for before vacation.
Yeah. I like
and
that.
then I'm just checking things off. And now I have a list for like, before Scoop, and I've got a big list of the things I want to get done. And like this podcast was on that list, for example, right? And then I'll have one for like Vegas when I'm at the World Series of Poker, all the things I need to get done to organize our events for our team and stuff like this. Like I look at the season of my life that I'm in, and I have like a big list. And then from that, I can kind of choose the rocks for the day, the things that I'm going to do each day.
Yeah.
And for the urgent stuff, it gets to the top of the list. But then for the important stuff, it goes straight to the calendar. Because what I realized about is like, okay, if you're trying to go to the gym, but you don't have a personal trainer, you're always like, oh, I could go to the gym now. Oh, I could go to the gym now. I could go to the gym later. When you have a personal trainer, your appointment is at the gym, 11 a.m.
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah.
Just so similar like podcast, right? Once it's scheduled, everything else, I got this from Tim Ferriss, like tasks expand the amount of time you give yourself for them. Once our podcast is on the schedule, okay, we start talking about what are we going to talk about, and it happens on that day, and it's boom. So when I have important stuff that no one else is going to make me do, I just put a block on my calendar when I'm going to do it, and like pretend I have an appointment with somebody to do it. And it is honestly, sometimes I think I should make like a free roll, you know, just text Michael and be like, hey man, if I don't do this at this time, I'm gonna give you $200, you know, because it really is that simple. It's just, if something's important to you, schedule it and do it. But we don't, you know, we rather deal with like something that we know is unimportant, but we've got a little red dot because somebody messaged us about it, you know?
Yeah, I think maybe well, firstly, I like this idea of separating the two. I might take that from you, because it is hard when there's so many things. It's hard to focus on the important ones that aren't urgent. And maybe also because like you get that little dopamine hit from crossing off a task, you know?
Oh yeah, I gotta keep all my crossed off things. I drag them to the bottom of the list so I can see 5 things to do and 20 done, you know, feels nice.
Especially in the Todoist app, like it makes a little sound when you like cross something off the list. I'm like, oh, you know, like my wife is pregnant, and I try to help out when I can, like just to remind her of things. So I'll put on the list something like, I don't know, remind Kalita that we need to do our baby's laundry, because we have to do the laundry all before the baby comes. And I'll be like, babe, can we do this so I can cross it off the list? Because like, and then, I mean, I don't say it, but secretly it's like, I want that dopamine hit, right? Like I want to cross this thing off the list. So yeah, there is that, but I don't know. I think it's good though to like be organized in that way. But I totally understand what you're saying about like separating and making sure there is time for the important things. And that's actually something I'm trying to be a little bit more mindful of as well.
I feel like for a long time, I always felt like I was just like one day behind, you know? Like you always have over a day's worth of stuff that's like looming over you. And when I sort of embrace being in a work season, right? And then, you know, yes, it's always ideal that you sit down at the computer and do the most important task at that time, right? And do everything in order of importance. But sometimes it's better just to do anything. You know, like if you're procrastinating about something, like, okay, fine, whatever. Just do something else, do 3 things.
Yeah.
And you start feeling the motion of that dopamine hits from doing things, like you get momentum. And while it is quote unquote eat the frog, like do the most difficult thing first thing in the morning, like cool, if that works for you, great. But if you're not going to do that, do something, you know, better do 3 things pissing you off, and then maybe you'll eat the frog tomorrow, than say, oh, I was supposed to do this, but I didn't, so I did nothing, you know?
Yeah. I also like the part you brought up about like having it on the calendar. Or I mean, for like going to the gym, having a personal trainer. I found the same with like making sure I go to the gym. I think a lot of things we were, you know, in our mindset session that you hosted a couple weeks back, we were talking about, you know, what you spend your money on. And I've generally been pretty good about not spending a lot of money on material things. I do like to spend money on not just experiences, but conveniences. So anything that makes my life a little bit easier. And that's why when you brought up, you know, like having something on the schedule for going to the gym, I recently, like a couple months back, I started a meal delivery service. And it's like I wanted to clean up my diet, but I knew, because I would end up being like, I was so, you know, working so much, get done work 8 o'clock. And then it's like, okay, what am I going to eat? I'm going to get delivery. I'm going to order some shit food, you know, cause like I'm hungry. and like, this is what I want right now. But now that I have this meal delivery service, not only is it a little bit cheaper, but I'm forcing myself to eat cleaner food with good macros. And since I order 1 week of food at a time, I have to eat it. You know what I mean? Like, I spend $130 a week on my food. I'm not going to put it to waste. And so I'm now forced to eat food that's not shit, you know?
Right.
So it is like, I think it is like putting yourself in the right positions, you know?
It's just another area where having a plan that happens once you set it up once happens automatically. Like, okay,
Right.
contract personal trainer, you set your dates and then they're just set and you just go. You plan your food. This guy's going to deliver the food like every day, 2 times a day or whatever. And that's it. You know,
Right.
and now it's easy to do the right thing.
And it takes the thinking out and the energy, you know, like, I don't, even if I'm ordering a delivery, it still might be like, oh, do I want this? Honey, do you want Chinese? Oh no, do you want Italian? This and that. I look up, it's been 15 goddamn minutes. You know what I mean? Now it's just like, I know what I'm going to eat. It's like, who was it that said they just wear a black t-shirt every single day?
Good job, Sam.
Yeah, that's great. You know, like, having these automated systems, I think, are really key for being efficient.
I just wear whatever t-shirt Julia puts on top of the pile, you know?
Yeah, I wear my Biore sweatpants. I love them every single day. Same tees.
You look like you're wearing a pretty great sweatshirt right now, actually. Can I see
Yeah,
that?
this is my black tie-dye. So I have a golden doodle, and people, when it's kind of funny when people see us on the street when I'm like walking my doodle, because this print looks just like my dog, and people always ask, oh, did you like get it done by him? It's actually not him, but I found it on Amazon, and this hoodie is very dear to my heart.
Yeah. Looks like he might be having a bit of a vision quest there, but you know.
Yeah.
You know, if I had to use my one time for like somebody making an optimized service for poker players, I'm sure it probably exists, but I don't know why I don't know about it. I mean, someone who would just book your flights and travel, but do a great job.
Yeah.
I see, like, they basically gave me the same thing you said about the, you know, the laundry detergent with flights. It's like, you know, they were set financially, but it's just impossible to turn off my brain's like desire to make sure I'm getting the cheapest flight and like, okay, this one's $50 cheaper, so I should use this website. But like, one thing I started doing when I go to Google Flights and like it gives me the flight prices, and like one's $700, one's $900, one's $750. If I know the website that's the cheapest is like a really bullshit website, you know, like one where you can't log in, and like when we're like, you know, it's like cheapo air, I'm just like, no, screw it. I'll just pay $100 more and book on like delta.com or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I know it's going to work and I'm not going to be frustrated, like trying to check my email for a confirmation didn't come or get some message like go through, like just done, you know, it's like, and it's hard to kind of get out of that max EV mindset to just say, I don't care if I paid $100 more for my flight. I want this done in 10 minutes, you know, not an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And like, granted, that might not resonate with someone who's like, you know, if you're low stakes early on in your poker career, yeah, like you probably do need to find the best price. It might be worth your, you know, hour and a half of something you don't like doing. But if you're a CEO of a company, if you're, you know, head coach and playing 25-50, like you should probably just get back to work, you know, and just get that done and not stress about it. And it's hard to do because we're so programmed from our early life not to do stuff like that, to you know, find the, you know, okay, well, how many liters is this one, you know, and how many liters is that one, and like buy the bulk price, and you know what I mean? Like just optimize things that don't matter.
Yeah. That don't matter, I think, is important. I think that's important.
There's a guy, I think his name's Remit. He does like posts about money and relationships and money mindset. He's actually quite good. And although his strategy, he probably wouldn't tell people to invest in crypto. He's a bit of a nit. He's like the, you know, 401k, you know, like 8% a year, whatever guy. But he has a lot of, I don't follow his strategies so much as I follow his mentality about money. And he has this idea of a risk-free number, where you just kind of like decide like anything that costs less than X amount, and no matter who you are and how much you make, you can have an amount for this. Like you just don't care about it, you know? like, I know you can get nickel and dime to death and these little things add up, but like, just saying, okay, if something is under $100, I'm not going to agonize over like the
Yeah,
price.
I like that.
Just buy it, you know?
I like that. That makes me think about just like conveniences. It's convenient to not obsess over a flight. If it's for $50, you know, if you're that I tried to, and I believe I've gotten better about that since we started with the stable, of just being aware of what my hourly rate is, and also being aware that if I spend 20 minutes on this, even if we're like obsessing over like the most plus EV, you actually are losing time. And then if it's, you know, if you spend 30 minutes on something that might save you $20, then it's probably not worth it, you know? So yeah, I can totally get down with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I need like $500 in EV to call customer service for anything. I
Yeah.
just screw it.
But
You know,
there's bigger things that I think I like the idea of saying, okay, $100 or less. Because there are poker players who I think have gone the other way and maybe spend a little bit too much money, especially when they're younger. And like, yeah, you don't want to just assume that the money is like always going to come in, right? If you have 100K month or something like that, you don't want to just say, oh, 100K month, I can go out and buy a 50K car, you know, even though I don't need it, right? Because like variance happens, game conditions get different. Yeah, like, and that's where like I was making 250, 300,000 a year throughout my 20s. And my brother convinced me, this is why like I always point to like, you know, having strong older people. My brother convinced me that I could not afford a car. And so when him and I lived together, I split his, you know, very modest Volkswagen Jetta, and both of us were doing well, and we're here like splitting a car, you know. And but I do think like that kind of mentality, A, it's humbling, and B, like you want to put away the money you make, you know, like you don't want to just like go out and you don't want to just blow your load, you know, just because you banked a tournament or had a big month or something like that.
Suffice to say, I made lots of mistakes with this when I was like 24, you know?
I think a lot of poker players do. And that's why like I don't credit myself for finding the right older people around me. I think that I was lucky, because like the way you're described, like I had an older brother, you know, like that was just luck, having a good role model in that sense. Like the other good mentors that came in my life, it was blind luck. I wasn't so smart that I went out and found these people. I bumped into it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I had good people in my life at times, but when I was in my early 20s living in Vegas, like with a bunch of other poker players, oh, we were all dumb, you know? I remember we went to the Aussie Millions and I just binked an F tops for like 60K. I think I had like 100K a month or something. And like my roommate at the time convinced me I should fly business class because it's Australia, it's so far away. And at some point it dawned on me that like I had flown business class and then sold action in a 10K. And this was like, I didn't realize it at the time because both things seem natural. Like my friends are going, like they're like, let's get business, and like it's a big buy-in, so I should sell action. I'm like, wait a minute, I could have sat and coached and taken all of myself. Like I'm a moron. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm still embarrassed. You know what I mean? When I look back on that, like my God, like how could you be so dumb? But it's just, you know, it's easy to fall into these traps. You know, you have a big year and maybe you had a 60K year followed by a 200K year. You immediately think I'm going to have a 500K year. You know,
Yes.
especially if you're early in your career, you don't think maybe I'm going to have like another 60K year, or maybe I'm a losing year, you know?
Right.
So yeah, it's tough. You were lucky, I think, to have your brother around, like you said, you know?
Yeah. And look, like there's no 401k or anything like that, like unless you do it yourself. So you really have to be smart, I think, you know.
One of the things that
Employer matching your 401k or something like that, you know, it's just you have to think about your future.
one of the things I would advise like young poker players to do is kind of like create your own luck by surrounding yourself with the right people.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, like I said earlier, the people around you, like even if you don't necessarily need to see the value, if you see the character, you know, you
Yeah.
see people who want to provide value, and like they might connect you with some opportunity. They might like it's gonna like can surprise you in that way, you know. When we started working together, we didn't imagine we'd be running a business together. We didn't imagine we'd have a team of 40 players from around the world, like playing a game neither of us had ever played before, you know. It's
Yeah.
but you know, we knew that we had a lot of things in common, and we knew that you know, had some ways we could benefit each other. So we started working together, and you know, we landed here, and I'd say it's a pretty good place.
Yeah. I think it's man, I don't want to just like overharp on it. I just think it's so important, the people you surround yourself with. And we have like a really good core group of guys. Obviously, we were conscious about the people that we chose, some of the coaches that we chose, because you know, it really is a top-down effect. And like the leaders in any community, other like the way they set the tone, they set the examples, you know. and I think that was something that we did a good job of, just choosing the right people to represent us.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, from my perspective as a mindset coach, having worked with like quite a lot of players, I I sort of see strategy, like while there is like certain, we talked about like inbound abilities, right? Like some people, maybe they just have a mind for the math, they have a mind for the game, like they're more likely to succeed because of their abilities. I think that all things being equal, if you look at someone and they have the right character, you know, they have the right values, they're going to do the work, the strategy work that results in getting competent, right?
Yeah.
They may not have what it takes to become super competent. They might not have what it takes to reach 25, 50, 50, 100.
Yeah.
I think if they have the intention and the will and the organization and the skills to do the work, you know, they can get to a moderate level of success at a minimum, right?
Yeah.
It's not rocket science to beat 1-2. So, I mean, when you're looking at people, I'm more interested, is this person going to do the work? Do they have the mindset that will lead them to having strategy as just a part of their life so that they end up good, right?
Yeah.
If they have the work ethic, you don't really care how good they are now because they're going to get where they're going. That's at least
Yeah.
how I see it.
Yeah, and I think it's particularly applicable in a game that's very kind of new, or at least I don't, maybe not new, but unsolved. You know,
Yeah.
so it's not yeah, it's not rocket science to even, I think, beat higher stakes right now. It'll get tougher in a few years as people get better, but in the meantime, presumably these guys will, you know, put in the work and get better.
So if I'm out there and I'm in the internet right now listening to this podcast, I'm sitting on a tram somewhere and I'm thinking, okay, so these guys are talking about a game where it's possible to beat 5-10. It's not that difficult, not rocket science, you know, largely unsolved. Like I want to make money. What should I do?
As far as maybe transitioning to 5 card?
Yeah, like, you know, someone listening to this podcast are like, okay, these guys keep talking about this opportunity. Like, how do I seize it? I want to have good friends. I want to have a cool network. What am I supposed to do here?
Contact Michael G and come come train with us, man. Come put in some work. No, but yeah, I mean, you know, I think if you're considering making a transition from another game, 4 card obviously is not as much of a transition. No Limit would be a bigger one. I think that just ask yourself, like, what is my outlook? You know, if you're doing really well in No Limit, then maybe there's no reason to make a shift. Because there is going to be a learning curve, you know, there's going to be a lot of work that's going to have to put in. You're going to have to like change the way you think, get out of some habits and that sort of thing. Like, so for me, big thing would be probably a very big challenge, because I came from, you know, No Limit, heads up. And I mean, the best players are always like super sticky, right? Like super, like you just call down super thin, this kind of thing. Not the case in 5-card. This is, so the first few months of me playing 5-card was just like call, wrong, call, wrong, call, wrong. Okay. All right. I cannot bluff catch this way anymore. So like it's kind of like rerouting some of these habits that you get into. And I mean, I don't know if it would be as difficult for everyone as it actually was for me, but there's something to be said about that. But there absolutely is opportunity, and yeah, I mean, if you're not completely content with the way it's going, then for me, the ship was, I would say, worth it.
So you would say a person needs to be ready for what their fall into winter before they're going to get to the spring and the summer. They're going to need to put in the hours with the videos, the hours with the tools, like learn the ranges, be ready to do.
Yeah. I mean, be prepared to humble yourself too, especially like you could be doing well or like a good no limit player, and you're going to come in those first few months, you're probably going to take some licks. It's going to take a little while. So delayed gratification. We talk about that a lot, right? Like not going to come right away, but so, I mean, first couple months, you might make less than what you're used to, but it's all about like month 6, month 7, month 8. What about month 12? Okay. What about year 2?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, a lot of the things we talked about today, but everything from like who you choose to work with and how open you are about networking to like how you spend your money and how much you expect to make in the future. A lot of it actually comes down to ego and humility.
Yeah. Yeah.
Being not overthink yourself like higher than you are, not underselling yourself and being underconfident of what you're capable of. Like it's tough for young men, especially when like, a lot of poker players, they start making more money than their parents and it feels a certain kind of way, maybe you always looked up to mom or dad and they had a, X whatever job. And then you start making 20K a month and you think like the sun just shines out of your butt, and it's like, then you hit hard times and you realize like, I'm just because I made $100 an hour doesn't mean I'm a genius, it means I had a good spot,
Yeah. It's highs and lows, man. It's all about finding yourself in that, it really is true. I don't think, at least for me, I never resonated with people saying that, oh, you get used to the swings, or like you don't feel it anymore. I heard other people say that before, and I used to say it and I stopped saying it because it actually doesn't feel true for me anymore. I still feel the swings, I've gotten better at it. I've done it more times. I'm confident that it goes the other way. It's not like I'm gonna, crawl into a hole and be like, oh, am I good at poker anymore? Like, well, maybe this is the end. Like you still feel it, but yeah, I think you just get a little bit better. So there's a bunch of humility.
Like I can take a bigger swing easier than before. And part of that is financial stability, but part of it is mental,
Yeah.
I can put up with poor, running poor for longer. I can still enjoy my life outside of poker easier, even if I've been, running poorly at the tables. But, let's not pretend that it's gone to zero. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You still in the session where you ran particularly poorly. It's not like you feel amazing all the time, but you might feel happy about something else. You might feel happy that you stuck to your strategy. You might feel happy that it didn't tilt you as much as it used to.
Yeah.
Like you find some wins in a day that wasn't positive. I mean, it's one of the goals of mindset is to have things in your session you can feel happy and proud about, even if it wasn't a profitable session.
Yeah. One of the things I try to get that I've gotten better at and I try to do is, especially after like a big losing session, just letting myself book one small win after that. So it could be something so easy, such as, because I had times before where big losing sessions and then very upset afterwards, and like flirting that line with going into like a spiral, And now I'm like, all right, well, what kind of small win could I just book here? It could be 20 push-ups. It could be, all right, I just got crushed. I'm going to go do 20 push-ups. Something that's like still reminds myself that like, hey, I'm not going to get down about this. Like, I'm still going to keep preparing, and I'm still going to like get back to work.
Really funny. Like, I mean, I guess it's kind of going back to your dopamine, like just check something off. But have you heard this expression, before enlightenment, you wash the dishes. After enlightenment, you wash the dishes?
I like that.
I feel like it's kind of the reverse. It's like before downswing, push-ups. After downswing,
wait, after downswing, what?
still push-ups. I think of this like a grounding activity, right? Like, if you're going to the gym and you're working on your squat, whether you win or lose today in poker isn't going to help you squat more. The bar is still the bar. It still weighs what it weighs.
Right.
And in your life, you can just go do that. You feel a sense of progress in, whether it's jujitsu, weightlifting, sticking to your habit, meditation, push-ups, whatever. Like, just, it's still the work. It doesn't change. I still walk my dog the same.
Yeah.
It doesn't. The world didn't stop because I lost 7K today. The world doesn't.
Yeah.
Birds don't care. The chipmunk doesn't care. Rocco certainly doesn't understand. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to come on today and share about your journey in poker. It's very interesting for me. I mean, I feel like I know you very well, and I still learned a lot. If you had to kind of sum up in like, 2 or 3 things, what do you think your key lessons would be for a young poker player listening to this? Maybe they like some things you had to say, resonate with some things in your career. Like, what are the 3 things you would tell them? Like, these are Ryan's top 3 keys for, a successful life as a poker player.
Put me on the spot. I mean, yeah, I'm always going to say, A, you have to be prepared to put in the work, regardless of the circumstances. B, momentum, I believe, is real. And I don't mean this in a woo-woo sense. Like, whereas momentum, oh, you're running good and the cards are going to keep going in your favor. I mean that when the cards are going in your favor, it's also probably more likely that you're playing your A game. And I believe in max volume at those times. When the cards aren't going in your favor, probably a little bit more likely you're hitting C game. And I think these are good times to get off and separate. And I was generally pretty good about doing that throughout my career of, like, there was times where I took quite a bit of time off when it wasn't going my way. And then I just went like pedal to the metal when it was. So momentum, and then 3, man, we talked a lot about it today, but surround yourself with the right people. You don't need to be a lone wolf. There's maybe some guys who are good at being a lone wolf, and I mean, but for the majority of us, there is something to be said about a sense of community and camaraderie and comparing ideas with people. It's like so many things, projections that I think are easy to make in poker about the way that other players interpret spots aren't necessarily true. That's one of the biggest things I've learned throughout working with, kind of coming from a little bit more of a lone wolf mentality. You have all these ways that you think other people think about the game, and they aren't necessarily true. So it's really interesting to hear other people's perspectives on it.
That was always my biggest leak. My very first poker coach told me, like, you got to stop. Like, he would like slap the table, told me to write it on a Post-it note, like, stop projecting your thought process on other players. I always assumed with me. So then it's like I was playing 20 Jameses, and it's like, no, you're not. You're playing these other people that think about these spots very differently.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think a lot of players do the opposite of your number 2 to their detriment. Like, when they're losing, they just keep playing because they want to get the monkey off the back. They don't want to they don't want to be in losing mode. So they
Yeah.
want to just get through the variance, right? Because it's easier to blame variance. But like you said, if you're losing, it is more likely that you might not be playing your best. So it's a time to play less and study more, right? If you feel like you're going to lose every day when you go to work, might as well study instead, right? And
Yeah.
I think people, they don't push their edge when they're winning because they want to ride, they want to keep the feeling, you know, they're always afraid. I keep playing, maybe I'll stop winning, you know, like I can kind of like live as a success day to day if I just like don't put in much volume and kind of ride the high note. But yeah, I mean, if you're hitting your stride, that makes sense. Now is the time to play. Everything is working, right?
Yeah. 100, you know, if you're someone who can make 250 or 300K a year, a lot of times, what I found is that 100K months make those years. That's kind of just like a random number. I know I'm just kind of, but it's like, I always found that most of the money I make in any given year came from 2 to 3 months. And so that's why I just like, all right, I'm pedal to the metal during those times, you know, and the other times just kind of try to tread water.
A lot of poker and business is the same. It's like putting yourself in the position to have that whoosh, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're grinding, nobody notices, nobody cares, very
Right.
thankless. And then just like boom, boom, boom. You see it in
Yeah.
tournaments all the time, you know? So,
And we've seen it a lot with our players already, right? Like it's just like out of nowhere, you look up, you're like, holy shit, that guy made how much in the last 3 months? You're like,
yeah,
oh my God. You know, we had somebody who made a crazy amount of money topping out at 3.6 last year. Remember going into the summer?
who was that?
Rez.
Oh yeah. Red line monster.
Red line freaking monster. That run, holy, I can't even imagine like how many buy-ins that was. That might have been the sickest buy-in swing I've ever seen. But that can happen in 5 card. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to use my calculator because I'm a
we made some videos particularly about Rez's style.
it's just 33,000 big blinds, bro.
That's not even that much.
Not even that much.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to win 33,000 big blinds this summer, I guess I would say apply for Poker Spirit, but be ready for the winter of your education and poker evolving. But the sun will come again, and it will be a glorious day.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, Ryan, thank you very much for the time today. I appreciate it, and thank you guys
Thanks,
all
man.
for. We'll catch you next episode. Until then, be well.
Cool. Thanks, James.
Ciao.